Good morning, everybody, and happy Tuesday. Going to give everybody just a couple of minutes to trickle in. Again, as we mentioned during every session, there's a section at the bottom for you to ask questions if there's anything that you wanted to make sure that we covered today. We did get a few from Instagram, and I've already kind of loaded them in there. So if you want to take a minute and put any questions that you have in there, that would be great. Braden, I wanted to ask you a question as people trickle in here is, what's your take so far? I know this morning you're having some tech struggles, but on this crowdcast versus like I'm seeing Google Hangouts or Skype or Zoom, kind of what's your take so far?
Well, for me, I like crowdcast for like participation and engagement. You've got the chat, where everyone can sort of participate, but then you've got sort of dedicated places for asking a question and the polls and things like that. So I like this. The only restriction I find to crowdcast is you're only allowed 4 people in a session at once. So hence why we're, jumping in and out and bringing up the people who we had for specific topics. For meetings, I really like Zoom because then everyone can talk and it's sort of an open dialogue. And I've been playing around with some of the functions in there, like breakout rooms. So if you have like 20 people on a call and like say you have a topic you want to brainstorm on, you can actually kick people into breakout rooms on the size you want. So like if you had 20 people and you wanted to break them into like 5 groups of 4, you could send those all out. People could have a little brainstorm session, and then you can, as the host, you could just recall people in. So there's some fun functionality like that. I haven't really used Google Hangouts at all. So I don't have a lot there, but yeah, I kind of live inside of Zoom and Crowdcast. They're both great because you can actually stream on multiple platforms as well. You can record, which I find, we've used Zoom for 3 years as a business because we record all of our pre-interviews. And so, we can do all of our pre-production from anywhere in the world, record all the interviews, and then be able to use those for story building. So I've used that platform a lot, but I typically like Crowdcast for webcast and things like this.
Interesting. Just you're hearing a lot of people worried about security and stuff right now. So everybody's kind of hesitant to use Zoom and all of that kind of fun stuff. Well, so I was curious to know.
I guess I've never had an issue with it, but mine have always been password protected. And I actually didn't know that you could not have password protected Zooms until the last like 2 weeks watching people jump into their Zooms. So, I mean, you can just go into your settings on Zoom and check a box that says automatically put a password and put the 9-digit code on top of your 9-digit room number. And apparently that's supposed to work. I've never had anyone in a Zoom call that wasn't supposed to be there. So that was kind of a new thing for me.
Me neither. I've never.
But yeah.
But yeah, I guess if you have like.
Sorry, I was just saying most of those problems have come from people just using default settings. Where if you just set up the room, then it's hard actually to get in.
Right. All right. Well, good morning, everybody. If you're just kind of getting into the room here, if you have any questions or anything, please feel free to drop them in the chat or get them in the Ask a Question section down below. We are going to get started. So first up this morning, John's going to give us a few pointers on brand positioning and strategy and kind of some of the pain points that some people are experiencing right now and how we can kind of overcome those. So over to you, John.
Sure. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. This whole session that we're doing today is really focused on moving forward. So some of this absolutely will apply to what we're dealing with right now, but a lot of this is also for when we get through the other side and building and using this opportunity to build in that direction. And what we find and what I see all the time, and I'm sure this to be true, but in today's world, the market is crowded. There's brands competing for your customers' time, money, and attention, and it's more than ever. So how are you positioned not only to survive, but to thrive? And that's what we want to talk about a little bit this morning, because proper positioning will increase your value by narrowing your field of competition and also amplifying your differentiation. And that's something, that's the foundation and the starting point of branding, really, and building a brand. So brand positioning, in terms of a definition, if you're looking to help understand a little bit more what it is, it's the mental space that you want to occupy in your customer's mind. And so if you consider this, what is the first thing you want people to think about when they hear your name? This does not mean being a jack of all trades. I think we use this adage a lot. Jack of all trades, master of none. You can't be all things to all people. And in business, that's really important to understand. If you try, and some services, they can survive that way, but if you try, you're going to end up competing on price. I see something in the chat here about not being able to hear me. Can others confirm they can hear me?
I can hear you fine.
But I can't see your face.
I can't see you.
I can't see you either, though, Braden.
Okay.
Oh.
Well, a
Oh,
number
Angela
of people are
says she
saying
can
they can
see.
hear me. So I'm going to keep going, and then you can chat with Dave to see if you can sort that out. So yeah, so your ability to be replaced will directly impact your value. So if you consider if 1,000 businesses can do what you do, your value is much lower than if only 50 can do what you do. And so if you consider this idea that if you shut down today, how long would it take for your customers to replace you? And that is where your value is going to be anchored. And how you improve that is brand positioning. And so at the intersection of expertise and perspective is your positioning. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this later, but it's the idea that expertise makes you good and perspective makes you different. So how do you position your brand? For most, it's valuable to hire someone like myself to help navigate this often uncharted territory for most brands. However, if you have more time than money, it's more beneficial to work through it yourself at this point. And many of you may be in this situation with the current pandemic going on. But there's a lot of things that you can do to work through on your own. You know your brand well, and you have a vision for where you want things to go. And so that's what we wanted to give you some pointers to consider that. Positioning consists of three main parts, essentially your purpose, your promise, and your personality. So your brand purpose is the reason your brand exists. It's your why. And if you've heard Simon Sinek talk about this, he's the thought leader in defining your why. I highly recommend you look into his TED Talk, but it's that idea of what comes from within and why you exist. The other thing is that it's your North Star that will drive everything you do. So it is the most refined aspect of what your brand is and what your positioning is. It's your noble cause. It's something that should unify your team, unify stakeholders, and inspire them. It's the reason people want to work with you, want to work for you, and it's the reason they do good work when they are on your team. Your brand promise, this is similar to your value proposition. Your value proposition is part of this, but your promise is much more than rational benefits, which is often what can be defined as your value proposition. The promise your brand makes to its customers. And so every brand does offer a promise and always are seeking to make good on that promise. But if you understand what that promise is and carefully articulate that, it helps to define you in the market. So this is how you deliver value, whether it's your product, whether it's your service, whether it's the experience and the people that are involved. That's where it goes beyond just the rational benefits that we talked about. But it's important to set out what those benefits are and be very clear of that, and that would be your value proposition. It also sets customers' expectations that you will continue to aim to deliver on consistently and with every opportunity. And when you consider what your customers' experience is like, whether it's on the phone, whether it's an email, when they walk through your doors, let alone purchasing or engaging your product or service, that's where you can stand out from others. And then the last thing is your personality. This is your brand character. This is your tone. I often use brand archetypes. And so it's understanding if your brand was a member of society, how would they interact with your customers? Because people do interact with brands. And it's important to understand the role that brands play. And so that would be your personality. It's how your brand behaves, how they interact, but then also how your customers will interact with you. And so your positioning, I mean, the way that it's often articulated is in a brand positioning statement. And this is a common way to articulate your brand positioning, but this is something that's internal, not external. It's used to inform your messaging. It's used to align stakeholders, to build unity of purpose as a business and as a brand and as a team for the people that work with you. But this is not something that is to be shown externally, although it should absolutely inform your messaging that does go external. Some things to consider in writing a positioning statement is being very clear on who your customer is. Know who you're addressing. This is psychographics, this is demographics. They're both really essential. Psychographics, especially these days, are more important. Demographics used to be more important when that was the sole source of analytics when it came to TV and radio and everyone was on the same platforms. It's getting a lot more complicated now, but there's a lot more opportunity if you understand what psychographics are. And so if I can define that a little bit for you, demographics are who your customer is. And so you consider gender, race, age, marital status, income, physique, and a lot of those things that would define who they are. But what's more important is the way they think, why they buy, and what's important to them. That is a much better definition of who your audience is and being able to understand who they really are. That's things like beliefs, values, aspirations, hobbies, personality, attitude, and things like that. And so there's actually a number of brands that I've worked with that are able to identify their audience through psychographics instead of demographics, because demographics in many cases can actually be misleading, and we want to be careful with that. So understanding how they think is very beneficial. Be clear on what your product or service is. Be able to clearly articulate what it is that you're trying to sell people. That should be a given, but be very clear on it. And then understanding your value proposition and what makes you different. So what are the benefits that you're offering people, and how are you different from people that do something similar? And why can you claim this? Putting those aspects together is going to help you at least make a start on being able to articulate your positioning and develop some level of a statement to keep you aligned and consistent in that manner. So hopefully those things help you. I mean, it's really a quick snapshot, and I work for a decent amount of time with brands on this. It can often be months, sometimes it's weeks or just a couple of days, but it's something you need to work through and revisit. But hopefully this will help you be able to think through some of this on your own and use the time that you have to build for the future.
That's great. Thanks, John. Can you talk a little bit in terms of what changes when we're in a bit of a crisis mode, or specifically a time like this? Like, what do we change?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good question, because it's important that you're not going to make changes now that are going to affect your ability to communicate clearly when this is over. And so if your customers, if you're reshaping your business that is going to go back, then it's going to be a muddy message, and it's going to become difficult for customers to follow you that way. However, your brand does need to adapt. It just doesn't need to change. And so it's important to understand that. So this is somewhat general. It's going to differ for many of you depending on what industry you're in. Purpose, no. Purpose does not change. That's the one thing, unless you're going through a major rebrand, that's the one thing that should never change in the life of your brand, because it's why you exist. Now, obviously, things can significantly impact that, but generally speaking, your purpose does not change. Your promise possibly changes if the benefits that your customers experience and the experience that they have with your brand changes, and for some that will, but for most it won't. So possibly that may change. Personality, no. However, your tone might change, and your tone in many cases should change, but your personality shouldn't. Your vision, absolutely not. That's where you're headed. And your mission, again, possibly, probably not. If the challenge your customers face, then your mission may change. For some people, that may have changed now and be changed forever, but for most of you, certainly not. Messaging, yes. Your messaging is what you're communicating that is built on all of this foundation that is your brand. So that absolutely changes. That's always changing in minor ways. I mean, it shouldn't be brand new every day, but you understand what I'm talking about that way.
Right.
So generally speaking, what's going to change is potentially your promise, definitely your messaging. Everything else, for the most part, does not change.
Okay. And can you talk a little bit in terms of I think we touched a little bit about this in one of the first sessions. A lot of people right now are being presented with work that they may have said no to in the past, or just wasn't kind of in line with their purpose. And now they're kind of wondering is it okay to do that now? Or is it more important to steer clear to allow, to keep that clarity in terms of who you are and who you serve?
Yes, absolutely. So absolutely, you can do work outside of your positioning. There's a quote from David C. Baker that is really important to remember and has helped guide me. It's the idea that positioning is not what you do, it's the work you pursue. And so work will come in, even in normal times, work will come in. And if you're able to do it, absolutely do it. We all have those types of projects that help to pay the bills, but it's not exactly within our niche or within our positioning. Positioning is what you're pursuing. And so, yeah, that's going to increase over time, but especially in a time like this, we need to adapt, but just don't change your positioning, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And so what I've actually been encouraging some of my clients to do is to make sure that they do more of the work that they love, but that it's okay for them to still do some of the work that maybe isn't exactly in alignment with what they do. And just to maybe put a cap on it, or like maybe don't do more than 20% of your work outside of what it is that you truly want to be doing. Because I think it's also important that they remember the business that they're in, and that they're clear with that, and kind of sticking to that too for their own moral, right?
Yes. If you have the work coming in, and for anyone in creative services, or it just, at least I know from my perspective, there is something to be said about leaving the opportunity for when the clients you're targeting come along.
Right.
So it's when work's coming in and you need the work, absolutely you can do it. But it's being mindful of where you're planning to grow. And so it's, yes and no, but you can do other work.
Right. 100%. I mean, right now, I think for some, it's a matter of having an income and not having an income. So of course, if it means having money coming in, by all means, do the work. If it's something that you can do, right? 100%. Another question for you in terms of, and like, this is for somebody in my position, and I know there's a lot of people that are operating solely off of their name. Do you have any suggestions or recommendations in terms of how the messaging is when it is that you're just operating from your name versus maybe so instead of a personal brand, it being like a business brand? Anything on that you could share?
Yeah, naming is an interesting one. A lot of different perspectives. It's going to be different on what you value. The first several years on my own, I was John Allison Design, mainly of getting up and going quickly. And my reputation was in my name and building that way. And then obviously I've adapted now to be Backcountry. Like, your name it's about you. You're selling you. And if you want to build anything that goes beyond that, then don't use your name. Or if you're going to build a team around you, for me, I mean, to be honest, I was looking to build a story, right? A story that brands could connect with and that would make sense. And my name didn't offer that. Now, as an artist or as a designer, my name worked fine, right? And so it depends, I think, on how you want to scale and how you want to communicate with people. It's just going to be different for everyone. So I don't really want to say yes or no, or even lean a certain way, because it just depends.
Right. It could be timing. It could be, like you said, growth. It could be a number of things, right? I actually completely forgot that you were operating from your name in the early stages of all of this. So it's kind of nice to hear that you've evolved from one to the other, right? Yeah,
but that might not be the right call for everybody. That was based on what I wanted to do, and you can be just as successful that way, but it depends.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And it's something that I've actually played with quite a bit more recently, and is actually part of the reason why I did launch the Inspire Local thing. It was kind of playing with both and seeing which worked and which didn't work, or which one had a better response and didn't have a better response. So yeah, I think if there's an opportunity for some people, if they are thinking about it, if they can try it in some way, shape, or form, that it could be beneficial to see which one takes and gains some traction.
Yeah, and you think about a succession plan and stuff like that, and if that's something that's in your sights, then obviously you have to consider that. You can't sell a name, but
exactly.
I mean, maybe you could, but yeah.
It's not as easy. It's almost like whenever you have a couple, like a husband and wife, that are running a business, and the business is solely run because the two of them are still involved, the relationships that they built. So when it comes time to selling that company, or if they want to try to exit the company, it's a lot harder because it's harder to sell those relationships when they were based with people instead of based with a company or a bigger brand, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Braden, did you have anything to add? Are you still struggling with your camera?
No, I'm here. I'm just hanging out.
Okay.
All I can see is me. So
I can't see John, so I think we're all having some issues here. Oh, there you just disappeared. So we wanted to kind of talk a little bit in terms of sharing some ideas of some of the things that not every business could do, but it's something that could kind of get your gears going in terms of things that you could be trying with your business. Does anybody in the chat have any questions at this point before we jump into that? Anything at all? Okay, we'll wait and we'll see if anything comes in. I guess I can't just sit here and stare and wait for somebody to say something.
Well, if they can always use the ask a question at the bottom and we can address it at the end.
Exactly. So Braden, I'll give you the mic in terms of kind of starting, even just based on some of the things that you're seeing now, on some of the projects that you're seeing now, or even some of the opportunities that you're seeing that other business owners or other creatives aren't, maybe not that they're not taking advantage, but a lot of people I feel like they hit a brick wall and it's like their creative juices aren't flowing. So I think that the goal of this conversation was to kind of see if there was a way that we could reignite some of those things to get people thinking creatively again, and how they can kind of try some of these things in their business. I appreciate the fact that both John and Braden are kind of chiming in on this, because this is a core piece of their business. So I think if either of you had anything or wanted to jump in here in terms of kind of to get the conversation, I'll hand that over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big advantage right now is, regardless of if you're a local company and your audience is local, or if you're Ontario, or if you're national, or if you're international, like every one of your customers is dealing with this pandemic in some way, shape, or form. So there's like this universal relatability to the scenario that everyone understands. Most of us in North America are at home, or very limited in the movement we're doing. So you have this sort of blank slate of attention, but also a common piece of it's not empathy, but it's you have this relatability that you don't normally get, right? You normally have to really work from the ground up to sort of cultivate the scenario that we have right now. And so you have this huge advantage to sort of create new audiences and build deeper connections with people, because there's a really great opportunity right now to be authentic with your audience. We talked a bit, with Rob over these last two sessions, but like Rob's audience is totally engrossed and participates with Rob because Rob's so authentic and true to who he is as a human being and as a brand, right? And so you're not figuring out, is that the real Rob? It's just Rob. And so I think there's a lot of brands that have an opportunity to sort of just be humble and authentic and real with their audience. And it's one of sort of the basic tenets of storytelling, is that people find characters that they can relate to, that they connect with the most, right? There's a scientific theory called character identification, but it's how much you relate and how much you connect to that person. You don't have to like them for character identification to move you emotionally. You just have to be able to relate to them in some way. And so when you see people that are sharing something that is relatable to you, you're more likely to connect with it. I think the worst thing that brands can do right now is continue running forward as if everything is normal, right? Like, I'm sure we're all on social media more than we, would have been a month ago. Or at least I find I am. Like, I'm scrolling through my Facebook feed or my LinkedIn feed or my Instagram feed just more often than I normally would. And the thing that I really see really quickly is when someone is posting as if everything's normal, or as if they did an ad buy a month ago, right? And like it's a weird thing I do, but when I work out in the morning, I always watch Conan from the night before. weirdly specific, but that's what I do. And I watch it on the CTV app on my TV, and it always plays 4 ads. And it is really interesting to see how like 3 of those 4 ads, yes, Rob Conan is still a thing. I'm still a big fan and have been since like 92. But um, there's one ad in the 4 today. Every time there was a horrible commercial break for Montana's, you know, the steak house, if you call it that. Every commercial break, Montana's was running this commercial on come to the restaurant and get a steak, and we've got a promo. And it was like, no, you don't, because no one's going to Montana's. And you know, it's just so tone deaf, and you can tell it's just a leftover remnant from an ad buy they did before. And you know, there is the financial side of it, right? Which is like, well, we paid for this thing, do we just leave it up? Which, you know, I understand, and from, you know, a brand of that scale, that wasn't a cheap campaign to run. But I feel like it's doing more damage to them because they look so tone deaf and oblivious to what's actually going on, that all it's going to do is damage their brand. Right, we talked about a little bit before with Mercedes still running the commercials on broadcast that, you know, are just luxury car commercials. And, you know, people may still be buying luxury cars right now, like people that are in the income bracket that can afford that, or, you know, work a job where they still have the regular income. So people might be making those buying decisions, but the impact of a poorly, like a bad taste ad is really going to damage a brand, right? And so it's just one of those that's interesting to really pay attention to. And right now is a time as you're evaluating how does your brand communicate over the next, you know, 1, 3, 6 months. Be really aware of what's going on. Be really aware of what your audience wants and needs to hear, and then curate your messages. You know, whether that's doing Instagram lives, or whether that's doing, you know, selfie videos on an Instagram story, or, you know, whatever the mechanism you choose to engage your audience. Just it's a time to sort of be real and honest, and with that, not being afraid to sell or market, because there is still an audience for your product, right? So it's not a time to sort of be scared and shy away from that, because there are still people whose incomes aren't affected by this. I've talked to several people whose income is up since this, because either their spending has gone down or they have more work now. So, you know, if you're an artist or a maker or, you know, a woodworker, there is a market out there. And so it's a matter of making sure that you're staying present with them, you're continually engaging with them, and then staying authentic to the scenario, because everyone is in it.
Right. Do you have any advice in terms of how people can get inspired to kind of start doing those things? Because on top of being able to try those things right now, a lot of people never did that stuff before. So it's all new to them. And I think this is also a great opportunity for them to try to start dabbling in some of those things, because it is such an emotional and raw time for everybody. So everybody's kind of feeling that same thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, Rob just said it in the chat. You know, it's kind of just a go and do it. Like, it can be hard to find motivation, and it can be scary to an extent, you know, to start something. You know, for example, I'm just starting to launch a podcast. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks, if I can get a few more guests. But basically, my approach was like, well, if I'm going to do a podcast, I want to do the podcast that I want to do, right? And so I just took like a swing for the fences approach to it, and identified like who are the top 25 guests that I would want to talk to in, you know, what I want to do a podcast on. And like some of the names on that list are insane, right? Like, and I'm aware they are insane, but it's
I feel like he should have like this wire with a plug, and every time he just kind of waves it like, I'm here.
So like now is the opportunity, because the flip side to it is the people that I've reached out to are also sitting at home, and I'm seeing them post videos, and, you know, and I'm seeing them, you know, on, you know, shows from a Zoom call and stuff like that. And so, you know, they're at home, they're looking for their ways to stay creative as well. And so, you know, now is a really great time to be ambitious. Pick up the phone or email someone that you'd never normally talk to. And it's the same with content, right? It's like if you've always wanted to do Instagram stories, or you wanted to do Instagram lives, like, you just see what your audience engages with. You might be surprised, because I mean, the engagement on the Instagram lives that I've been watching is like through the roof. One of my favorites that's been going on is the Arkells. Max from the Arkells has been doing guitar lessons every day at 1:00, and then bringing in other musicians from around the country and like inviting them into the Instagram live. And like the other day, I just kind of checked in on it, and they were at 8,000 or 9,000 people watching that live. And they're a good sized Canadian band, but it's not like it's the Rolling Stones. And the fact that their audience is continually building every day because they do it every day, and they're just having fun with it and sharing the thing that they love. I think the advantage we have to being entrepreneurs, and I think for the most part, everyone that's in these lives and participating in the chat, is owns their own business in some way. And we all do it because we love it, right? And so there's this opportunity to just share that passion, and you kind of have this unbridled opportunity to just do something and play. And if it doesn't work, you can scrap it and move on to something else. But it's a really good time to just think of the things that you've always wanted to do. Now you have the time to do them, so try them. And if you don't like doing them, then you can stop them. But it's just time to it's a really good time to just try things.
Exactly. I think it is showing that you're trying things and trying to move forward just makes you relatable as well, which is just also a huge benefit to your business. John, did you have anything that you wanted to add to this before we move on to the next topic?
Sure. Yeah. I think it's also a really good time to discover some of the benefits you have to offer to customers that you may not have thought about before or may not have focused on, and vice versa for customers to discover some of the benefits that you can offer them. Like Toyota, I've seen some of their commercials recently, and they're really focusing on having flexible payments, about the service. And so there's a huge benefit that a car dealership can offer beyond dealing cars, right? And so a lot of us need to think about what value do we have beyond what we typically sell, if that's been affected in any way. And I think that's a good exercise to go through. And we're going to get to this when we start talking about creating content, but it's this idea of your perspective on what you do and what you sell is incredibly valuable. And that's what increases your value and affects the prices you can charge. Because sometimes if you do the same thing as others, your perspective is the only difference. And so why will people pay more or go to you versus paying less for someone else, right? This is also what will help people or cause people to fly across the country versus walking across the street. And so when you can dig down beyond the surface of where your value is, I think you'll be surprised on what you uncover. And then it's being able to communicate that clearly and effectively, and in delivering consistently to your customers.
That's great. I love that. I just wanted to acknowledge Brandy's comment about noticing that there are less ads on the CTV app. I don't use the app, but I'm kind of not surprised to hear that, to be honest with you. Okay, so let's move on to the next topic. We have adapting business models. So if we can bring Dave and Melissa in. Thank you, John.
Sorry, lots of clicks.
It's all good. We trust your abilities. Hey, Melissa.
Hello.
He's coming. There
he is.
Hi there. I really need a haircut. How many people in the world need a haircut right now?
I've seen a lot of moms cutting kids' hair the last while.
Laura did our little boy, and it did not turn out well.
Yeah, I did my two kids, but they have long straight hair, and one just kept getting shorter and shorter, and I was like, I'm going to stop now. All right, so let's dive into the topic of business models. So can we talk a little bit about, again, you two always kind of get pegged as the ones who have the highest overhead and employees and all of that fun stuff. So can we talk a little bit about how you've adapted your business model and what changes you've made over the last few weeks?
I can go first. So for us, essentially, it has been really interesting. We're lucky because we are incorporated. Sorry, my dog's trying to jump on me. We're incorporated, so it allows for more flexibility. My heart really feels right now for those that are sole proprietors because of the new information that's come out for the emergency benefit. So for us, we had to make the decision to lay off our entire team right at the beginning. We made that decision because we were afraid that if we got into the process of canceling shifts for too long, it would affect, at the time, EI. And we didn't want them to have less money because of it. So I think we made the right call, especially with how everything is still going. And basically, our business focus then turned into how can we pay our mandatory expenses that we cannot change. So we were trying to like quickly pivot. At the time, were already selling board games. We quickly launched board gaming deliveries, local deliveries, so that we could still serve our Kingston and surrounding area customers. And then after that, we started thinking about other ways that we can virtually entertain people, I suppose. So something that we had already been working towards was trying to become an entertainment hub of sorts in Kingston. So we just took all of the ideas that we were working on and tried to digitize them. So we were already doing trivia nights on Tuesdays, and as of this week, we're starting to do trivia nights 2 times a week on Zoom, just to kind of keep us in the forefront of our customers' minds as well. Like, even if they can't jump onto Zoom to do trivia, at least they'll remember that we do trivia. So after this is all done, if people are looking for a fun event, they can come out and participate. So for us this week, it's Harry Potter, for example. And then some other things that we're doing as well right now is we're trying to figure out how to digitize one of our escape rooms. So we've picked one. We are, I guess, lucky between my business partner and I that we both have a pretty good skill set. So we have distributed, like, I've been programming a secret portal on our website that can lead people through that can lead people through games, and she's designing and tweaking our game so that it will be a good flow, essentially. So we're going to test that out. We've started beta testing that yesterday, hoping to do that for a week or so, and then we can launch it to the public. I think one of the big things is really being knowledgeable on what is allowed and not allowed right now. So technically we're e-commerce, so e-commerce and delivery are allowed to continue being a thing. So that's how we're pivoting right now. Yeah, is there anything else you wanted me to touch on?
No, I think that's great. I think it's funny because you would think that digitizing these games, in my head, I see like this mountain of work, but you guys just kind of grabbed your cameras and just started doing it. And we're like, okay, well, what else are we going to do with our time type of thing? Why not invest it in this and see if this is something that can work, right?
Yeah, definitely. So it's like, I don't think we would ever have done this otherwise. There's never been a need, like we get booked out. But the nice part about this, I think we're both really wary on putting too much time into something that won't be long term. So although we will not, I'm sure we wouldn't be offering a digital version of our escape rooms long term, even after we open again, we'll still have all these digital assets that we can use for marketing. So we'll have a bunch of different photos, videos, whatever. Like, I've never had to suspend myself on a ladder to try to do like a huge image of one of our games before, but now that we have it and it looks really neat, I'm able to use that for marketing assets later on. So everything that we're doing, we're trying to at least tie it in with something that will be long term as well.
Absolutely. And I think that's the key in all of this is it is something that's going to help you come out at the other end, that it's still going to be beneficial that you've taken this. It's not just like a temporary, I'm going to go to the left, and then it's going to be hard for you to come back to the right when it's time to come back to the right. I think that's been a bit of a common theme here today. Dave, what about you? What are some of the things that you've done? And I know last week you shared that you were doing a virtual thing on Friday. So we'd love to hear how that went, just to kind of maybe give some people an opportunity to think that they should also be kind of gathering their friends and maybe members or subscribers or past clients.
Yeah, I think this has been a really eye-opening thing for me. I think by opening the physical space, we really saw how important it was to have relationships. We did them in the physical world. And then we've been limited in that capacity. So we, in the first couple of weeks, I think what happened was when you're out of your comfort zone, your tendency is to do nothing, which is what happened to me. And then I realized, oh, I've got to actually get back out there and reach out to how they're doing. So we did our first digital happy hour on Friday, and it was overwhelmingly positive. So what it's made me realize is that our role is to be the facilitator of relationships and connection. And so relationships really are what are most valuable to us. And so what I've done is continue to reach out to people digitally. I sent a video to the landlord and said, hey, I just want to let you know you built a great place. I'm here keeping an eye on it. And he called me back, and we had this really cool conversation, and it ended up with, I'm going to support you, Dave. I believe in you. So relationships, maintain them, keep them going. And so we've just shifted to a digital version. And so I would recommend you just keep talking to your customers and your friends and whatever it is. It's the relationships that are the glue that will keep your customers around. So just keep talking to them.
Are you doing anything to potentially attract new people to your community? I know it's kind of two different conversations, and I know it's super important and cheaper to maintain existing clients and existing customers, but are you doing anything to try and grow that community right now either?
No, I'm taking care of the ones that I know today. I think just nurturing the ones we have is time consuming, and I'm not thinking about new customers. I'm thinking about keeping the ones I have, learning about them, and then through them, they will refer us to other people that align well. But no, I am focused on who we have, and if it attracts others because they believe in our values, that's wonderful. But I think maintaining who you have today is probably the number one priority, and then I think it'll spin off because people do speak. If you're delivering really great value, I think they'll tell, hey, there's something really cool going on over there, and they'll join. We also don't take a very outbound sales strategy. All of our customers have walked through the door because they've heard of us. I'm not a great marketer, but referrals have been the mechanism for most of our growth, and I think that's the strategy for new customers, is just to have our customers tell other people.
That's great. I think you're right. I'm sure it's like this in every community, but from my experience in Kingston, is word of mouth is like 99% of the opportunities. That's where they're coming from, right? Braden, did you have anything that you wanted to add in terms of business models?
Not specifically. I mean, I think the thing to be looking at right now is just how can you adapt, right? Like, if Melissa and Dave are really great examples of, people with physical assets, right? And their business revenue depends on people coming to them. If you're a maker, how do you showcase your work? If you're a brewery, how do you get people to drink your beer? And so it's interesting watching, businesses like Stone City, add a delivery service, right? Which is something they never did before because they're a tap room model, right? So their income is dependent on people coming to the brewery, having a beer and having a bite to eat. That's how they, make the bulk of their income, and the bottle shop is sort of a bonus. Well, now the bottle shop is their only source of income. And so they had to get really creative, and beyond that, now no one can also go to the bottle shop, right? And so they, have now had to figure out how to pivot and become a logistics company where they are hand delivering beer to the community. So I think now is just a time where, if you want to keep sales going and you want to keep business going, you're going to have to get really creative and really scrappy, to figure out ways to still be able to add the value and the expertise that you bring, and what makes people want to buy from you, just in different ways, right? And so, Dave is pursuing like a customer service model, right? And really making sure that those members feel taken care of, which is so important if you are in the hospitality business, or you have customers coming to you. What is that customer service journey, and how does it change now, right? And so, a lot of us are just having to figure out, how do we provide the same service? How do we just make sure that you know, our clients and our customers are taken care of and they feel cared for, because, you know, I think as small business owners, we all legitimately care about our customers and our clients and the people we work with. And so now it's just about creating creative where it's how do you maintain that level of service and keep the community and keep everything going while having to do it in a different way.
Right. And still kind of providing that value. Like Dave, like you said earlier this week, just facilitating that call was a game changer for you and kind of changed your view on the importance of bringing those people together, even if it wasn't a virtual platform, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think it's interesting that this has forced us to be innovators. But if somebody had taken those approaches before COVID, I suspect they would have been very successful. This is pushing us to be innovative, and those services only build deeper relationships with your customers, and that's really what it's about, is trying to become more valued by your customers. And right now is an opportunity to do that. They need help, and if you help them, they're going to be even more loyal to you. And so it doesn't feel like an opportunity right now, but I think it is, because they want to have conversations with you.
I agree. I mean, a lot of us have shied away from having technology be a part of our business for whatever reason. And now we don't have a choice but to adapt to those technologies. Like even just yesterday alone, I know I'm sure a lot of people are kind of feeling my pain. The schools have shifted to online, and I have 3 kids, and there's no 2 teachers that are doing anything the same. So it's like figuring out the teacher's methodology and how they're going about it with the technology. But I trust when this is over, I'm going to be super thankful that my kids are finally being forced to use the Google tools that we've all been using, and they just haven't kind of implemented those in the classroom, right? Okay, so moving on, we're going to get into the fun stuff. So we're going to talk about the basics of content creation. I don't know about any of you, but I've noticed in my feed, some people have gone completely silent. They're no longer posting. They don't know what to say. They don't know how to say it. So we're going to take a look at this from a few different perspectives. We're going to start with Rob so that he can stop trying to make us laugh in the comments section here. And he's going to come at this from a business perspective in terms of how this has helped him. For him, it's business as usual in the social media world. But are you noticing an increase of engagement?
You're going to have to repeat the question. I was doing a story.
Sorry to interrupt you. So just really kind of talking about how you maintain your content and how you keep it real. And I'd also be curious to know if you've noticed an increase in the engagement that you're getting right now.
Okay, so first thing was, excuse me, I learned a long time ago to sort of create as much content as you can on any given project. So we film like literally everything. Like what you see in my stories and posts and stuff is maybe 2% of what was actually filmed. Like we have a GoPro camera running all the time, a time-lapse camera, and then I have my phone. And we film just everything so that in times like this, you still have content to post. I usually do that on the weekends. So I have stuff on the weekend, I'll post something. That's when, I'll talk about Instagram mainly because that's obviously one of the biggest ones. You can take a project you're working on and break it down into so many pieces that you could have content about just that product for like a week. And so I do that. A lot of the stuff normally I just, tape that day and I'll either edit it and make an IGTV video or I'll post a few pictures. I find that using carousels work the best instead of a single static picture. Video is still king. So just having sort of building up your backlog, I guess you could say, of content that you can pull from sort of helps you get through those downtimes, or even days where you're like, I don't feel like doing this today. Then you have stuff to pick from. So that's kind of how I do it. I'd say keeping it real. There's going to be people that disagree with me on this, but I personally feel that especially for a small business, the owner of that business needs to be the face on their social media platform. You're the one, nobody is going to be more, I guess, passionate about your business than you are. Nobody's going to be able to explain your business better than you can. And that truly comes across. Like, if you want people to understand your business, then I think it should be the owners that are telling people about that. And I know there's a lot of people that don't like being on camera and they're shy. I was too. I didn't like it at the beginning either, but I just kept doing it, and now it's like second nature. I'm not saying you have to get that hardcore about it, but I find that it definitely helps. Like you were talking about earlier, I just try keeping it real. Like I said in the comments, like last night, one of my stories was we were cleaning out my freezer because we had raspberries that exploded. There was chopped up bodies in the freezer. So, just that's real. That's my life, right? And you're going to see what I do at work and you're going to see what I do at home. And it's just, that's how I find the best engagement. And people truly do relate better with somebody that they can talk to, like people see me in the street. It's still weird, but they'll come up to me and be like, "You Rob from Stone City?" I'm like, "Yep." And then I've had times where people are like, they send me a DM later on in the day and say, "We saw you at the mall, but my daughter wanted to come say hi, but we told her that she's not allowed to do that to celebrities." I'm like, "I'm no celebrity. Like, come say hello. I'm just a regular guy, right?" So yeah. It's just, and getting that right there kind of shows that they know who I am and know what my business is. And that's exactly the whole goal, right? As far as engagement goes over this period, I'd say it's been about the same for me. But again, I haven't changed anything. So
we're all in the wrong business. You seem to just do it hunky-dory over there.
Well, like I said in our first episode, I'm doing okay right now. I'm more concerned down the road.
Right. Something that you said, I think it was during the last session, is that you don't even rewatch the videos, you just post them. I think that's key, because I think that that's also a hole that some people can kind of get stuck in, and then the self-doubt takes over and they just don't bother posting.
Absolutely. Just show who you truly are. Like I said, the only things that I don't post is if I swore by mistake, then I'll redo it.
Braden, what about you from a video perspective?
Sorry.
He agrees.
Yes, I agree. In terms of like making, or in terms of like just.
What are some tips that you would give right now to anybody that's considering exploring video? So, I mean, I know for Rob, it's specific to Instagram and Instagram stories, whereas some people right now are also looking at how can I build like video content for other things instead of just like in IG stories.
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's some sort of basic things I think that help with video, just in terms of like, in terms of not just like developing content, but in terms of how you shoot content, right? Like how you film it is, I also think is important. Like, you want to maintain the authenticity, right? So, Rob's a great example of someone who films everything in their own space, right? It's in his space. The world, you understand the world, there's a forgiveness around the mic being on the camera and hearing the saws and the sanders and stuff like that, because if you were in a wood shop and he was using a microphone, you'd be like, you'd feel a little cheated, right? Because, it would be like someone walking through Disneyland filming like a selfie video. And if you don't hear the crowd and the sounds and stuff like that, like you're like, why am I, there's no engagement there. And, it's not true to your audience. So see, I tried sharing my screen the other day and it failed horribly. Well, no, can't do that. What did I do?
My favorite thing to see Rob struggle with is whenever he can't switch the camera from the front to the rear.
Well, so I mean, I sort of had, I think there's sort of two parts to it, right? There's the like the selfie video piece to it, or even the Zoom calls, right? Like, I think a lot of us are on a lot more phone calls on video than we've ever been before, and so I think there's sort of two things you can do to, one, make your selfie videos look better, but also your Zoom calls look better, which is like, one, when you go into a room, figure out where the light is, right? I tried to I took a bunch of photos and put them in a little slideshow to show you guys, but I can't share my screen, so that doesn't help. But when I walk into a room, I sort of try to figure out where are all the light sources, right? Where are windows, are lights on, where is light coming from? And then, if you just hold up your phone, right? I can do it. If you just hold up your phone and you walk around the room with your camera on, you can see sort of where the light plays, right? So you don't want your back to a window, right? If there's a window behind you, that window's blown out, it looks sort of really messy and disorganized. You're silhouetted, it looks ugly. And so, I also typically don't like a light coming straight onto me. Like if you can, imagine what my space looks like. Oh, I can go wider. How about that? Wider. So beside me over here, there's a big sunroom with just a ton of windows, and then this is the inside of my house. And so, it's dark here, it's light here, and then, I have a bit of a three-dimensional shape to my face because there's light coming in from the side. If I was to turn this way, everything gets really flat, and I turn this way, then I'm in the shade. And so you want to just sort of think about, as you're moving through a room, how does the light work in that space? The other thing with light quality that I look for is mixed light temperature. So do you have a really orange bulb in your living room or a weird blue one behind Mike? Mike, yours is intentional. I can forgive it. Like if you're, if you have halogen lights in your kitchen and it's the middle of the day, and outside the color temperature is really blue, right? Outside, the light that comes from the sun is really blue. And then a lot of times we use warm light inside of our house. So what I do during the day is I always turn my lights off, right? So in this space I'm in right now, it's just natural light. It's lit by a window, and I hung a curtain so that the sun diffuses a bit, so you don't get giant streaks across me. The other thing, with a cell phone specifically, is that that's the camera, a little tiny. Let's see if it'll get in focus. Come on, you can do that. So like that's the camera, right? And so if you compare that to a DSLR or a mirrorless or the film cameras that we would shoot on, the sensor is like, a quarter of your fingernail, which means there's not a lot of area to capture light on it. And so you need a lot more light to make a camera sensor happy. So like, that's why when you film outside on a cell phone, like it looks amazing, right? Because it captures colors so well and there's a lot of light coming into that camera. If you're in a dark basement, it looks really grainy and kind of looks, a little, Blair Witch Project. And so it's just being conscious of like where you are in your house, and then where those light sources are. If you're shooting something at night, it's also being aware of like, are you standing under a pot light and you have those giant shadows under your eyes? I have really deep set eyes, so I need light at a really low level. Otherwise, I look like a raccoon, right? And so it's being aware of sort of just where light is in your space. And then I think the second thing to know for like a Zoom call or for selfie videos is the position of the camera, right? How high is the camera? Like, mine's a little funny. My setup's all quirky today, but normally my sight line is straight in front to the camera. I have to look down to see you guys. So, and I want to see you, not me. But if you're doing a Zoom call on a laptop or you're doing a selfie video, right? Like no one wants to look up your nose, right? So it's like, if you can figure out a way, to get your laptop up so your sight lines are normal, right? You can use a stack of wood, you can use books, you can use whatever, right? But it's just finding a way to raise and don't forget your custom background, Rob says. But like figuring out a way to raise your camera. If you're shooting a selfie video, shoot it at eye height, right? Because that's natural and that's where people want to see. If you're, if you need to show something lower, that's when you can sort of go high. But I typically take myself out of the video because the angle from high makes you look really small, and it actually removes your authority psychologically. So if I go high, then it's, then you show the object, but when you come back to yourself, get it eye height, because psychologically it makes people feel more like an equal. And so it's just sort of playing around in a room with a camera. You can do a lot on an iPhone. I mean, there's feature films shot on iPhones now. And so, it's just taking some time to make sure things aren't backlit. Don't put things against a window, and take your time with it. And then, on a phone, one of the things I really like to do is there's a function on an iPhone, and I don't know if it must exist somewhere on Android. I just don't know how to trigger it, but you can do an exposure lock, which basically means the camera is not going to sort of jump through its exposure trying to expose, to you exactly. You can lock the exposure to what you want, and so you can kind of control that. If you turn to a window, it's not all of a sudden going to get really dark on you, or if you turn into the shadow, it's not going to get really bright on you. So there's a couple of things like that. And then there's a few apps out there you can get. There's one called Filmic Pro. I think it's on both Android and iOS. Rob has that. But so Filmic Pro basically gives you all of the controls and functionality of like a professional camera. So you can control everything from your aperture to your shutter speed to your white balance to like anything you want. And so you can get really, really great images out of an iPhone just by taking over from the AI that's trying to control the camera. And so I think it's just a lot of playing, and then there's a bunch of cheap editors around. I think, if you have anything Apple, you get iMovie for free, and that does a pretty decent job of cutting things. So it's just a matter of playing, and, look at images that you really like. And with, Michael say this from photography as well, but 95% of that image is light, right? And so really paying attention to where the light sources are and what they're doing. And, if you want to shoot, a plate of food, because you're a chef and you want to show something off, put it in the middle of a table and then move the camera around it in a full circle. And you'll see really quickly where the best light is on that object. And then, so it's the same thing with video, is just be aware of your surroundings and work to position yourself in a way where you're really happy with the image.
Yeah, and something that I've struggled with a lot in the last few weeks too is, I'll speak for the three of us with the glasses, and the reflections has been a struggle. And I know John had mentioned before when he was on, just by reducing the white on your screen. So I actually dim mine, and it gets really kind of shady in terms of what I can see, but it removes the glare, which is really annoying for me anyway.
Yeah, you can actually. I'll give you a perfect example of that. White, not white. White, not white. So yeah, that definitely, just there you go, quick little lesson. But I did want to kind of talk on the points that Braden was mentioning. One other thing to keep in mind when you're doing any video or photographing of yourself, the larger the light source, the more flattering it's going to be on you. If you're using a tiny little flashlight pointed at you, you're going to look horrifying. If you're using a great big window, you're going to look a lot better. And not only that, but the closer you get to the window, the softer the light is going to get. So if you're videotaping in and around a window, the closer you get to the window, the more light you have available to you. So like Braden was saying, they're tiny little sensors. So the more light you have, the better quality the image is going to be. So the closer you get, the more light there is. For obvious reasons, the better video you're going to get. Now, my specialty lies a little more in artificial light. I don't deal a lot with with natural light, partly because I am in a basement and I don't really have an option, but also you can't. There's only so much control you can have over a natural light source, and I like to have control over all that stuff. So I prefer artificial. One tip I will. So this, I'm actually lighting myself with a light up here. It's just a regular like panel light, but I'll give you a quick tip. This light right now is actually turned around because it's about this big. and it's just a panel light. But if I turn that around, it's a tiny little light source. So you can see that all the shadows around my nose and stuff like that they're really sharp and aggressive. That's partly because this is bright. I was gonna swear, but this is just ridiculously bright. And it's a tiny little light source. So if I just turn this around and bounce it off the wall in front of me, it takes that tiny little light source. Sorry, I keep having a look into the camera. It takes that tiny little light source and turns it into a great big one from the wall, and it dims it down because it's bounced light. It's not coming directly from the light itself. So bounce light is another great way to modify your lighting and kind of fine tune what you have available to you, and dimming things down and bouncing it and modifiers, and I could go on about this for days, but those are just a few tips that you can use with the light that you have available to you. What are you writing about me?
He's wondering why his face is so red.
Oh,
We all know who the class clown is around here.
That's a tint issue. That's you got to fix that in post.
You know what? I just on a quick bet, I bet it's in your top left. There's a really bright hotspot on that wall, and with the camera's automatic, right? So it's trying to expose the image as nicely as it can, and with that much light coming off the wall like that, it's probably adjusting the white balance because that is all white natural light. So if you turn to your right, if you can't,
Left.
No,
My left or your left?
He needs to slide to his right. Rob, you need to slide to your right. And then turn the camera.
Are we talking about me or Rob?
No, you're good.
Oh, okay.
Rob.
Rob's trying to.
I didn't know you were talking about me before.
Swivel to the right.
Rob in the top. I think it's the camera, though. I think the whole computer needs to turn a little bit to the right.
Oh.
So away from the light source. Yeah, there you go. And then you slide into it. It'll adjust. This is horrible. Auto.
Maybe it's my blood pressure.
You're really nervous and you're blushing.
Yeah, there you go. It's got to be that.
I don't like being on camera.
Just sit here looking at you, Braden. How could you help it?
I know. He's got like this magical glow going on.
I have an aura. I've been working on it. It's exactly what Mike said, right? I mean, the sun's out today, so it looks a lot brighter and warmer. But so I have this big linen curtain, and I literally taped it to the window because there's no curtain rod or anything over there. So it basically takes the sun that's out there and just makes this giant soft source, which is why you can see the shadows on my face are really, really soft. So I just hung a giant curtain. If you hung a bed sheet in a window, you'd get a big soft source of light. I mean, we do that all the time. If anyone's seen any of our work, we call ourselves documentary style filmmakers because we go to people's locations and film in them. And so we don't have the ability to light like a studio with massive light setups. We typically try to keep it pretty simple, and we, for the most part, add to the light that already exists in a space. And so, we spend more time modifying light than we do creating light. And so, doing something like this, hanging a bed sheet in a window that's white, you'll get a large natural source instead of getting like a really spotty, harsh window. So that's sort of what, those are the kinds of things that we do. I mean, using printer paper works pretty well, especially on a bright sunny day. On a cloudy day, it's just going to block light, but on a bright sunny day, it's really easy to, put a piece of tape, use some Scotch tape and tape a bunch of pieces of printer paper up in a window, and it's going to work surprisingly well. Wax paper works well because it's a bit of a diffusion source as well. It's just getting creative, right? Finding ways to sort of soften the light as it passes through a space.
Exactly. So just before we bring John in to talk from his perspective, Mike, I know you and I have chatted quite a bit in terms of product photography. Can you talk a little bit about some of the makeshift ways that you would recommend for people to take product pictures right now?
Yeah, I don't know if you can share my screen, Braden, but I have prepared a few slides for you.
Rob, I'm going to bounce you out because I think I can share a screen. Mike, you should be able to share your screen now.
Oh, I have to do stuff?
Yeah. You got to hover above your face.
Oh, look at me go. Screen share. This one.
Works for him.
Hey, it worked.
Yeah, I don't have any security on my computer, so all my shit's it's all just at risk. Oh. Okay, sorry. There's stuff all over my screen right now. So I actually had a question come in from somebody the other day about light boxes, and I think that's the sale of light boxes are probably going through the roof right now. And if you're not familiar with it, it's basically a collapsible box with a built-in backdrop that you can buy for about $50, $60. Some of them go up to hundreds of dollars. And it's basically just a fold-out box with some lights in it that shoot light into this white box. And then you put your product in there and you can shoot it with your cell phone. So he jumped in a chat, luckily with myself and Braden, and we both immediately went to, don't buy one of those. It's a waste of money. You can do the same thing for $2 and a big window. And there are a lot of great purposes for a light box, but depending on what you're shooting, it's completely unnecessary. So I reached out to him and I said, what exactly are you photographing that you require this light box for? And he told me that he's actually photographing cards. So I said, well, scrap the light box. It's you're not going to get your money's worth out of it. Go to the dollar store and buy 2 big pieces of Bristol board. And I took this photo because a lot of people are going to be selling online. They need just a white backdrop, simple, basic shot. So this was actually photographed in 2 minutes, and that includes me going down to the basement to get 2 pieces of Bristol board and coming up and setting it up. Shot with my cell phone. Basically, all it is. Let's see if I can turn this off. So in front of a great big window, over here is a great big window. I have a unique situation where I have 2 light sources. There's another big window over here, but that wouldn't necessarily change much about this particular setup. But all you need to do is set this on a nice big table, put your product on there. All this is doing is bouncing light, which we had discussed earlier. So the light is coming in from the big window, lighting the subject, and then bouncing off this cardstock here and filling in all of these shadows here. So I did this in a few minutes with a window and a cell phone. All you would need to do is take this into any photo editing software and brighten the background, because if I lighten the background, you can see that it's not a perfect white. So you will have to edit it a little bit, but there are tons of free softwares out there, or there's even free applications where you can upload the photo and they will send you a finished image with the background removed. There's all kinds of resources out there. And then another thing you can do with the exact same setup is something like this, where you have a basic table. This is actually a project that John and I collaborated on with Rob, these coasters here. And this is a situation, exact same light setup. There's a great big window over here spilling light onto the subjects. And this is just a quick little scene that we put together based on the market that John wanted to reach. This was a brand project that he did for his own brand, and he markets to a lot of outdoors companies and things like that. So we wanted to play into kind of the situation that they could find themselves in. So his target audience could look at this and see the modern huntsman having their morning coffee with the coasters on their coffee table or whatever. And this is a simple way to get a little more context. This might be a great Instagram post rather than an e-commerce image. But this is a great way to add a little context and give people more of a taste of the experience from your product rather than just a straight product image. So, I mean, and this is just super simple. Nice big window, nice and close to the light source, soft, delicate. This was taken with a professional camera, but the same can be done with your cell phone in a pinch. So I don't know if that.
Awesome. No, that's
Does
awesome.
anybody have any questions?
Anybody in the chat that's selling products that had any questions about that? While we wait for that, we'll bring John in and he can talk on his perspective as a thought leader on the content creation, the basics of content creation.
I think one of the things to be considering too right now is that a lot of people have to or are building online stores, right? And I think, you have an advantage right now in that, most of us have a little bit of extra time. Bristol board and paper and things like that aren't expensive. And, most of us have a smartphone. So there's just a really great opportunity to sort of personalize your assets a little bit. If you're putting stuff up in a Shopify store, like, finding ways to bring your brand into those objects in a nice way is really useful, right? Like, white backgrounds are great and they're simple. I know I have a lot of friends who are like pulling the images off their suppliers' websites because they've already shot them and they're trying to scramble and get something together. But there's no reason that over the next 4 or 6 weeks, as you're establishing this online store and getting into a rhythm, that you can't find a simple opportunity like what Mike did with John's coasters and that brand piece, which is like, just find a little simple way to create some context for your images, right? Like, do you have a retail front that you can put in the background of some of the photos and just, get nice light on the product? And then when someone goes to your store, there's, that visual recognition of, oh, this is your space. Or is there a texture, like wood or stone or grass that is representative of your brand, right? And so, now is a really good time to sort of just make sure that sort of across your brand that, those little things you're doing, if you're doing an Instagram live, like, don't wear, a beat up holy t-shirt if you're a clothing brand, right? And just things like that. Just make really, really simple choices that will help make your brand continue and stay representative of what you've created as you go forward.
And maybe one day we'll let Mike talk about how he doesn't like pictures with white backgrounds. But understands the circumstances right now are very different than they were before.
It's not that I dislike them. They certainly have a purpose, but like Braden said, there's so much value that can be injected into a simple product shot just by adding a little bit of context. For instance, with the coaster shots, they're nice coasters and shot on a nice background. Somebody could look at those and think, yeah, that's really great. But when you put it in context and think and put them in the mindset of, oh, wow, these would look great on my coffee table, and I would really love to enjoy these with my morning coffee, and I can see myself integrating this product into my life. It adds to the desire and increases the buying power of the content that you're putting out.
All right, John, over to you.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about the thought leadership side of content creation, just because there's a lot we can be doing on multiple fronts. The video and the photo is really good, especially if you're a product. But there's also things that you can be writing about, and I think it's important to be doing both. In terms of developing content, because the first hesitation with that is, what do I write about? I'm not good at writing, and so that's obviously going to be a big one to stop you from doing it. It's what stopped me from doing it for a long time, and even now I'm struggling to find time to do it, and so I'm needing to force ways to build that out. But when you're sharing content or you're writing about content, you start with your expertise. That's the field in which you'll play, and then you focus on your perspective, because that's what's worth sharing. You don't want to just share what's been written on before that others would be more informed about, or even worse is regurgitating what someone else has said and calling it your own. Do not do that. And so when you infuse your perspective on a subject or a topic, or even better, an experience or a conflict that your customer's having, then it is helpful and it will also draw sales. It's a great indirect call to action. It's a way of easily onboarding people who aren't ready to engage your services yet. And in the form of a blog, it's great for SEO and so on. So often articles, but you can get creative. This also applies to creating videos, even just little snippets that you might post on Insta and things like that. So you don't know what to write about. First, just start sharing your perspective on what you do, because hopefully you already have a different view on what you do than the average person. And so start writing about that, and you'll be amazed at where you go in terms of that. The other thing is, we've all been there in terms of sales. Anytime a customer or a potential customer objects to what you're selling or what you're trying to communicate, take that to heart, go home and write about it. Because then you'll have time to articulate and work through some of the concerns that they raised. Now, your product or service isn't going to be a fit for everybody, but sometimes maybe you've just done a really bad job communicating something and they're poking holes into your story or into your messaging. And so that's a great opportunity to be like, oh, well, what do I think about that? And then write about it. That's going to help you in terms of better understanding what you do, being able to better communicate. And next time someone has a rebuttal or has a concern about that, send them to that article. And it's a great way to help educate them in a very friendly manner, if that makes sense. Why does your product or service exist? How do you improve the lives of your customers? Why do you do things differently? A lot of things framed with why or how are great topics to write about. The other thing I would highly recommend is hire an editor. They are significantly cheaper than you would think in terms of editing blog posts or content that you might put out there. Their value far surpasses what you pay for it. But you want to specifically have them edit for grammar and tone. You don't need them to edit for necessarily everything, but the tone is helpful because it's hard to be consistent, and sometimes it's hard to come across the way we want to come across when we're not professional writers. And then grammar, of course, possibly spelling. I'm terrible at spelling. I need help with that, but fortunately computer software does help a little bit with that. Also, send to a colleague things that you've written and let them attack it from the perspective of challenging some of the things you say, because anything that's valid that they say just means that you're not communicating well enough. And so you can strengthen that or think about how to articulate some things better. That's helpful for all of us when we think through how we're communicating to people, because communication is absolutely critical and we all can be a lot better at it. The other thing is remembering that you're actually the primary beneficiary of everything you write, because it's going to help you articulate. It's going to help you be clear and concise. That's something that we all need help doing. It forces you to think through things that's going to form your perspective on things that you just take for granted, or you assume your customers understand that they might not. And so forcing yourself to think, which is difficult at times, I suggest early morning, is really, really helpful. It also provides you with a library of resources that you can send to clients when you recognize them facing certain issues, when you recognize possible colleagues who would be able to refer or recommend. This is a great way to help them understand how to talk about what you do, how to talk about what your product offers. And then it also provides a ton of reference to help you inform emails, website, messaging, social media posts. When you've thought through this stuff and been able to articulate it in a way that you are happy with, then you can constantly fall back on, oh, wait, how did I say that? And then being able to use that on social media. Reading through some of those things before a phone call, having talking points heading into a meeting. There's so much benefit that you gain in knowledge and better understanding what you do just by going through the process of writing, even if no one sees it. But there's a lot of benefit from people seeing it. And so use that and make a list of things you can write about and then start writing. It's going to be messy. That's fine. I don't think you're going to have a ton of blog followers when you first start publishing a blog. So work through all of that before you get followers, and then you slowly build that following and you get a lot better at it.
Those are some great tips. Thanks for sharing. So again, just in the kind of the matter of time, if nobody else on the panel has anything that they'd like to add to this, I'm going to just jump into the questions because there's some great ones in there. Okay, I'm a huge fan of this first one that came in from Instagram. So, do I close down and help other people for free, or do I keep going? Can we all nod our heads what our answer would be to that?
Well, let's frame it a little bit first. Can you help people by doing what you're doing?
Yes.
Because I don't think it's
this person
yes or no.
wasn't able to join today, but promised that they would watch the replay, and the answer would I would say yes, she can for sure.
Yeah, so keep going. Absolutely.
The other thing I would think about is like, you know, the question of free comes up a lot right now. You know, like we're doing something like this for free because we wanted to share our perspective and give, you know, people our perspectives on sort of the way we approach our things in our businesses, right? You know, of the 7 of us, some of us are doing okay, some of us are really struggling and repositioning and, you know, coming up with different ways to make revenue. But, you know, I think at the end of the day, we all believe that our businesses, you know, have a purpose, and so we're, you know, we're fighting for those. You know, there are things that I would do for free, and there are things that I won't do for free, right? And I think, you know, I think the big thing is how much value do you add to a, you know, a client or somebody in your community that, you know, needs that. There are, you know, I will, you know, happily share my entrepreneur and business knowledge all the time, right? Because, you know, I'm a small business owner and I care about Kingston and I care about the community and I care about all the business owners that are close friends of mine, you know, and I want to make sure that we all come out of this, you know, hopefully as good or better than we went into it. The story structure and, you know, the expertise and the value that we add to companies from a strategic and from a content perspective, I wouldn't give away for free. You know, I've gotten creative with how I can help my clients, but at the same time, you know, I have a business to run and I have employees and I have a lease to pay and all those kinds of things. And so I think you have to be really careful about, you know, doing things for free or saying you're doing things for free, because as soon as you say you do something for free, you've discounted, you know, the value you provide. And so, you know, the expectation will be that that's what it costs, right? And even if you write an invoice that says this thing costs $5,000 and I'm going to do it for $1,000 this one time, their framing in their mind is now that that thing costs $1,000. And you will, with that client, you will never get back up to what you should actually be charging and what the value you provide is. So, you know, I definitely think that you should keep going if you believe in your company and what you offer and the value you provide and the expertise you bring. You know, across any industry, whether you're a, you know, a craftsperson or a maker or a tech company, right? If you believe in what you're doing, then you know, yes. But be really careful about free and discounts and how you discount your service, because then you're going to start to devalue yourself and you're going to have a really hard time when you come out the other side of this, because now that you've changed those expectations and that framing, and is so much work to change that. You know, I mean, we're a great example of that, right? Which is like if we do a project for a client for $2,500, that client will never pay $50,000 for, you know, a broadcast level commercial, because in their mind that is the value of what we do is $2,500, and you'll never change that. I can win a new client no problem at $50,000 because of the framing in their mind is that's what that thing is worth, right? And as long as we're providing value and we're really delivering on what we said we can deliver, then they're not going to have an issue with it, right? But it is so much work to change the framing in an existing client's mind to say that all of a sudden I am now worth, you know, what I am worth. And so, you know, I would be really careful, regardless of, you know, what things are like right now, on how and when you discount to do things for free. It's just a very slippery and dangerous path. And that's also not saying don't do things for free, but be really smart about how you frame them and how you approach them, because you can create a giant hole for yourself if you don't do it right.
For sure.
Yeah, that's a good point. Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
I was just gonna kind of reaffirm that. Yeah, the important question now is, do you still offer the same value before all of this happened? Like, and my business is a great example. I mean, my biggest value is photographing products for people to buy online, and that create a lot more desire than your typical image. And in this particular instance, some might even argue that I'm more valuable now that everybody's trying to shift to an online sales platform, and they're trying to get as many sales from using nothing but imagery to create the desire and capture those sales. I'm also a service that can operate under the restrictions of COVID-19. All of my meetings can be done virtually. They can ship products to my studio. I can shoot in studio, ship them back, take payments virtually. Like there's nothing stopping me from from operating as usual. And in a situation like this where a client is panicking and needs to get shots on their website so that they can continue making money, there's a ton of value that I can offer to my clients to ensure that they are still making money in a time like this. So in an instance like that, like we all have to be compassionate to what's going on, but in an instance like that, it's, you know, if I were not to charge for my services, they would get way more value out of this exchange than I would. So I think it's important to keep in mind the value that you're offering, and whether or not that value is still there throughout all of this.
I love that you just added that, because I can say that her situation is exactly relevant to what you just said, is where she's actually providing more value than she was before, given the current circumstances.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily that I'm offering more value. It's just more valuable to particular people because of the situation that they're in.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I'm sure it's Danielle McAllister is the one that had the question. In her core, she has multiple things that she does, but one of the things is getting people in Shopify. So she has an online workshop that people can do at their own pace, and then she's there to help them as well, or she can set the store up for them. So in her case, if anything, as much as it's always been valuable, now more than ever, it's even more valuable for the people that are like, shit, I need to do this and I need to do this now. What's the easiest and quickest way to do it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And there's so much value in offering people something that they don't know how to do, and especially in a panicked state, like it just amplifies everything and makes everything harder. So yeah, I would say I would look at a situation like that and think she's more valuable than ever in a time like this.
Yeah, absolutely. So anybody have any advice on how she could get the word out beyond her reach?
Well, I think that's kind of where Braden alluded to what we're doing through this webinar, and there's a lot of free stuff you can do that isn't replacing your service, right? Like even talking about brand positioning and stuff, and I mean, I know a lot of my competitors would never do that because it's like, well, that's what we do, but it's like, no, my value really comes in hiring me as a guide to navigate this uncharted territory that you've never walked through, right? And so there's a lot you can do on your own, and some companies will do that, and they'll never be my client, and that's fine, right? You're able to help them, but the real value is working through that, and that's hard to do, right? If you don't have a clear direction, it's hard to work through that on your own. And so there is things you can do, but the value is very different from what we're talking about here. But we're still being able to help. We're still providing value in this type of a platform, and a lot of you are going to be able to do that. But it also is not going to compete or replace what it is that you are going to be able to sell. Right. And I think that's where Braden was talking about being smart about it and think about it. And really, in a lot of scenarios, it should actually play right into what you do, right? Increasing the value of what you actually do while still actually being helpful, right? And that seems contradictory, but it's not.
That's great. I think she'll be very happy with that response, to be honest with you. Okay, next question. Finding new ways to connect with past clients at the current time. So this is something that we've touched on a few times, how it's obviously cheaper to keep your current people happy than it is to kind of attract new ones. And Dave even talked about the importance of how he's nurturing those relationships instead of worrying about other relationships. So anybody have any tips? That one actually is coming from David, who I know he was here earlier. If you're still here, David, send us a little emoji there in the bottom corner, and we'll get to your question there.
I don't know that looking into new and different creative ways to reach out is really even necessary. Just calling them and letting them know that you're there and opening a dialogue about the fact that you're still able to help them any way that you can. And just if you already have a relationship, it should be easy just to call them and say, hey, I'm still here. I'm still doing stuff. If there's anything I can do, let's jump on a call. Let's figure it out. I don't know that you really have to find a new way to reach out to them. You already have that line of contact. So just giving them a call should be very welcomed from them to let them know that you're thinking of them.
It's true. There are a number of ways to do it, though, because in terms of being personal, absolutely, pick up the phone, and the objective is to show you care, right? Even if, like, not even selling, just how's business, right? And connect as a human. I think there's also an opportunity to, like, even if it's in the form of a blog or a video where we talked about content, create something that's going to address what your audience is dealing with, because you should know your audience well, right? So write something that's going, or create something that's going to address that, and then share that, right? And so that's a way to maybe be helpful to that next level, but you're reaching a really broad audience that way. So I think you can be really personal, be a human, care for them, and then, but you can also write something that would be helpful in this time that directly relates to the conflict or crisis they're dealing with.
Yeah, and when I think about the business that David is in, so he does 360 video and like virtual tours. So if and for him, if he's created content for some of these past clients, it would be easy for him to come to them and give them suggestions on new ways that maybe they can use that content. Or, hey, I noticed you didn't post all of, or don't forget you have these videos kind of stashed in your Dropbox or whatever that maybe you used months and months ago. You could easily repurpose those right now. Do you know what I mean? Like those types of things?
Absolutely. I follow up with clients from time to time just to check in and see how, like, if they're having any issues in terms of applying a new identity or questions in terms of being cohesive that way. And that's just a really good way just to be like, hey, I'm still here to help and support you if you have any questions. And I feel like that would apply in his type of scenario, right?
Absolutely. Okay, next we have, I think this is a question from Paul. So Paul is the owner of Safety Guys here in Kingston. So we've been struggling what to do about refunds. We have 65 clients who prepaid for training services before the crisis hit, and we had to shut down. Our clients have been amazing, and so far, no one is asking for a refund. They are waiting for the opportunity to reschedule, which could be months or more. Do we go ahead and make the goodwill gesture to provide refunds, which will be a financial hit right now? Do you have any suggestions so that we can do the right thing?
I read a thread on Facebook. There was, when all this happened, the wedding photography community went a little bonkers because those are some pretty big down payments on dates that may not be happening anymore. And there was some pretty heated discussions. There were a lot of people that said, you know, it's a deposit, and as long as you're kind and respectful on rescheduling the date, there's no reason that you should give a refund. And there were other people on the other end of the spectrum saying, if you're not giving a refund, you're a monster. I, as a photographer, and B, someone who has a deposit in the hands of a photographer for an upcoming wedding, I kind of take the stance as long as you're doing what's in the best interest of your client, and you're there and kind and respectful of them, whatever you choose to do is kind of isn't, I wouldn't say the wrong answer, right? Like if a client calls you and says, hey, I'm going to lose my house if you don't give me this deposit back, then yeah, maybe give them the deposit back. But if you have a number of deposits out who are doing fine, they're happy to reschedule, then I would say hang on to that. And as long as you make it accessible to them and an option, I wouldn't say it's 100% necessary to give back the money, as long as you're going to reschedule it and do it at some point. But I think it's just a matter of being respectful of people if they contact you and say, I would like a refund because I need that money. I think at that point, it just kind of falls into, you know, the relationship you have with that particular client.
Do we know if Paul, is this a one-time training or is this like a subscription? Because when I first read your question, I was thinking like a gym where it would be like an ongoing subscription. This is a one-time thing?
Yeah, I'm going to assume it'd be like working from heights or like
One-time
women's
training.
like
Yeah, you just typed it there. Yeah, I mean, I would first ask the question on how else you can deliver value. That was definitely more focused on the ongoing thing. But at the same time, is there ways to still deliver value? And that could be delaying and doing the service later, or is there something that you could also do to keep that scheduled now? I don't know what that would be. I'm just not familiar with the safety training industry, but then you communicate that, and communication could be something like, here's what we're planning to do in terms of giving you value and making good on delivering for what you've paid for. If you still need to cancel, we totally understand, right? And that's getting to what Mike's talking about, be a human. However, your focus is to deliver the value, right? And I would set that up first. However, if you consider sticking with us, here's how we're going to make good on that, right? So there is an option for them to cancel, but I wouldn't default to assuming everyone will cancel or everyone needs to cancel. I understand why we think that way, but most people won't, or not every customer is going to be thinking that way, right? We tend to think so apologetically, which is okay. It's a good default, but working through it and be like, there will be value in other ways you can deliver it. So can you maintain those customers? And I think you can. Maybe not all of them, right? Be clear in how you communicate that.
Yeah,
one big thing to consider.
years and years. So these are people. If these are customers that are like constantly sending their staff to you to do their staff training, I don't think you need to worry about them not coming back. I know I was talking to Paul just before the end of the year, and he was getting everything virtual. But some of these courses have to be done in person, whether it be like I'm assuming like a working from heights or those types of things. There's actually a physical component to it. So is there a piece that can be done virtual to kind of start the process, and then maybe they do the physical piece later? I could see some dangers in that, even if you did it now and you couldn't finish for another 6 or 7 months. So I think it's really going to depend on what the course is and what those components are. Yeah, and like when the Ministry of Labor is involved, it's a whole other ballgame.
I think from a business perspective too, one of the things that's really important to consider in this, right, is people have paid in advance for a service, right? But if this lasts for you, Paul, for 6 or 8 months, and you're considering, and someone's going to reschedule that training for 8 months from now, but you're considering the money they paid in advance as cash flow now. The other thing you have to remember is what happens at the other end of this, where in 6 months, all of a sudden 65 companies come back and go, we want to do our training now, and they've already prepaid. And so that money, you're considering that working capital right now, but that's, the way we treat deposits is like, that's not money we have to spend until the project is started, right? And so that's one thing you need to consider as well, right? Which is like, if we pushed, it's why we canceled productions when clients came to us and we're like, we're going to freeze the production and we're going to push it to a later date. We said, we gave the deposit back or we didn't invoice the deposit if one was supposed to be upcoming, because if all of a sudden we had everything invoiced, we used that money to float us over the next 6 or 8 months until we could start filming things again. All of a sudden our bank account is going to be in really big trouble. And, we travel all over the world. And so, some of our projects have, $10,000 or $15,000 worth of expenses, just upfront costs that I'd have to cover. And so, I think you also need to weigh those kinds of things in, like, what are the scenarios? What are the timelines that you're planning on to be able to offer these training exercises, right? Because like shifting virtual for the things that can go virtual, I think will be huge. And it'll also allow you to be able to generate new business, right? Because now there's going to be construction companies who everyone is, laid off. But, a really great thing they could offer is, hey, you could upgrade or you could get this safety training because we can add value and you can add value to their companies while they're in a downturn. Right. But you have to also be looking at the business side of it, where it's not just how do we fulfill these contracts or how do we handle refunds, but if everyone all of a sudden in 8 months comes back and goes, okay, we're doing this now, can you afford to handle that much training if you've been using that cash flow over the last 6 or 8 months? So I think, John and Mike are exactly right on ways to approach the conversations around, do people want refunds and restructuring the offering to add value, but the business impact of it is also, really important to make sure that you are also predicting your cash flow and your expenses in an appropriate way, because you're going to need staffing to cover the training, and you're like, you know your business really well, right? And you guys have a really solid business, but you really need to be looking at what's the impact of if we don't give deposits and we have to do that training in 6 or 8 months. What does that look like? So, and then I think, just from a people standpoint, we're all human beings. And so I think, just like what Dave is doing with his community of Fractal, just have open conversations, right? Just talk to your clients and talk to your customers and say, the reality of the situation is we don't know when we'll be able to offer this. It's hands-on trainings. We have to offer it in person. Do you want us to reschedule it when things look better, or do you want us to refund you? I think, any of our clients have been more than willing to have that conversation. Everyone knows the scenario, right? So yeah, that was my advice.
That's a really great point, and something to keep a close eye on, and really evaluate your own situation and know what you're capable of. That's very important to think about.
And I also speak from experience, because early on, I was so bad at managing deposits. Some of our projects can last 2 years, right? And so you'd be through the deposit before you ever started shooting from a cash flow perspective. And, you get yourself in a lot of trouble trying to catch back up. And, we have hard costs and stuff like that, like you do. And so, I think it's just being really, now is a time to sort of really make sure that the business is in order, because, on the other end of this, all of us who are service providers who are delaying services or elements of our service because we can't do it right now, there's a cost to how far we have to push that off and how much work we have to do, basically for free on the other end of that, right? If we end up in a situation where we have to go film for 2 months and we have no income coming in, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. So it's those kinds of things to be thinking about, not just what is that client relationship as well, what is the business impact?
Paul, does that give you awesome? Anybody else have any questions or anything? We went way beyond our time. way beyond. It's some great conversation, and we're thankful for the people that have joined and kind of got involved a little bit more in the conversation today. It was nice to see. So if that's everything for today, we are back again on Thursday afternoon. That is going to be fully dedicated to you asking any questions that you may have for your business. So please take the time to submit questions. Super easy. You can go into the link for the next event, which is already posted in our bio. And you can access the Ask a Question section even before that we go live. So if you want to pop your questions in there, happy to field them via email or DMs or however that you want to get them across, but submit whatever you can, and we'll be back on Thursday. Thanks everybody for being here. See you later. Have a good week.
See you guys.
See you guys.